Hi, Roger. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Great. Lovely to meet you, Anna.
No worries. So let's go straight to the point. Please tell me a little bit about yourself and about your company.
Yeah, so I'm Roger Chao, and I'm one of the co-founders of our company, Imitation Machines, with my co-founder, Ilya Kozovkin. At Imitation Machines, we really believe that robots really should learn the way that humans do, the way we do. Basically by watching, by doing, and basically improving through experience. So our core mission as a company is really to make robots as easy to train as a new hire or a child or another person as well. And if we look at the whole robotics industry at the moment, it's booming, but it's bottlenecked. So look at all the hardware that we see out there. We've got quadrupeds, we've got robotic arms, we've got humanoids. They're all there. The hardware's there. It's really good stuff. But the intelligence of the robot, well, that's kind of stuck in the past from our perspective. So if you look at how robots are currently taught, you can see that the majority of new robotic behaviors today, they're manually programmed. Months and months, sometimes years of painstaking work by expensive engineers, often teams of engineers for every single new task. It's very slow, it's very rigid, and in a way, it's fundamentally broken by the dynamic of complex environments where robots are desperately needed. And in a way, our company, Imitation Machines, seeks to flip that paradigm. So we don't just program robots, we teach them. So our platform lets robots learn directly from human demonstrations. Just like a person might teach an apprentice or a child or another person, you show a robot how to do a task, it watches and it learns, and then after just 50 or so repetitions and demonstrations, it can then perform the task autonomously. So in a nutshell, it's robot agnostic, it's application agnostic, it's completely no code. And you look at the implications for this, you look at the applications of it, from construction sites to factories to ports. Our aim is to really empower robots to adapt, to evolve, and unlock their value for industries that today rely on very patchwork solutions. They've got hardware, they've got software, they've got manual labour, and they're trying to use that just to get by. We're really trying to bring that to the new age and really make it a lot more efficient as well. And from our perspective, we see the potential impact, which is huge. The projections show that by 2032, the software market for robots will be worth nearly $50 billion, dollars, and just under half of that percent will be worth $20 billion. Dollars. And that's in that behavior, the decision making, and the skill adaptation space. And that's our space. That's where we really want to grow, where we want to build our moat. So we really see ourselves as that missing intelligence layer for robots, as the software first approach that turns capable hardware into capable robots.
Yeah, it sounds like extremely interesting, but how do you actually integrate with robots? Because I would imagine that whoever manufactured these robots, they have like very close system and they don't want to open it up for any other softwares.
So, like I was saying, our platform is designed to be robot agnostic and application agnostic. So, no matter the type of robot that you have, most robots will have a robotic operating system, a ROS. So, think of that as, say, your Windows software. What we're trying to do is we're trying to be a Microsoft Word, which you then install on your robotic operating system, and then you use that to demonstrate and train the robots. So, it's designed to work across the robotic operating system platform itself.
Interesting. And how did you come up with this idea?
So I guess from our perspective, it wasn't just a random brain fart. It wasn't evolved out of a vacuum. It was the culmination of many years of, I guess, frustration, excitement, and research. And that's really where Ilya and I, my co-founder, work really well together. So for me personally, it was kind of that moment of realization where I was visiting a factory in another role that I was working in. And the robot was actually trying to perform quite an intricate task in that factory itself. And I actually asked the engineer, well, how long does it take to actually program the behavior? And the answer floored me. He said, well, it takes months of effort by a team of highly skilled specialists just for that one task. And if you want the robot to do anything slightly different, you're back to square one. So in a way, I kind of saw this as using a supercomputer as a glorified vending machine. Like it has the potential to do so much more, but it's not being used to its full ability itself, its perspective. And the software really just wasn't keeping up. And at the same time, you had my co-founder Ilya, who's a deep expert in this field, and he was very deeply immersed in reinforcement learning and AR research. So at the time, he was working on very cutting edge algorithms and trying to explore how robots could learn from data rather than from code. So together as a team, we realized that the breakthrough that was happening in machine learning in an academic context could actually be translated to the real world from an industry perspective itself. So we saw that by using imitation learning, we could fundamentally change robotics. But we really needed a way to bridge the gap from the lab, so from academia, to the real world. And that's really what we tried to do. So that was kind of the spark that kind of lit this fire underneath all of us. And we really asked ourselves, well, what if robots could actually learn directly from humans? So not by coding, but instead by showing them. So what if a robot was teaching a robot was as easy as training a junior colleague or teaching a child from that perspective? So from that moment then, we really just went all in and we started validating the concept with a lot of real world testing and talking to industry. So training robots from scratch without code, just from human demonstrations. So we actually found throughout this
Great.
process that it wasn't just a cool idea, it actually worked. And that moment of frustration that engineer felt when I was on the factory floor with them actually then turned into a mission to actually unlock the full potential of robotics by making machines learn the way that humans do. So that's kind of us. That's Imitation Machines. We turn frustration into innovation and really reimagine a new world of what's possible where AI meets the real world or the factory floor.
Amazing. And how did you meet with your co-founder?
So we actually met through Antler, which is a global venture capital firm, but they also run a bit of a matchmaking service themselves, where they bring together people with technical expertise, but also people with business experience or strategy experience. And that's kind of where Antler actually brought the two of us together. And we found that there was a really good mix and that match between Ilya's strengths and his weaknesses and my strengths and my weaknesses, where I've got that strategy skill set, the commercialization skill set. I've been a prior CEO of large organizations as well. I've been a prior investor. I've launched startups in the past. But Ilya brought that really deep technical knowledge. He's got a neuroscience PhD in neuroscience. He's done a lot of work in machine learning and imitation learning algorithms. He's really one of those rare minds who can see 10, 20 steps ahead in terms of the technical landscape, but staying grounded in that practical deployment and development of the task itself. So again, my
Great.
role there was really to translate this cutting edge technology into a business and work with others around that.
Great. What's your feedback about the program, about the Antler? Would you recommend it for other founders who are just starting their business?
I think having spoken to Ilya and others that have been involved in the Antler program, I do find that we're all pretty much on the same page. Like this Antler experience was very much a transformative experience for all of us. It wasn't just about the funding, it's about the validation, the acceleration, and the building momentum. So kind of having that whole ecosystem surrounding you from a startup perspective. And when we first joined Antler, we were just individuals. I'd never met Ilya before. And we were just at the idea stage. We had this really bold hypothesis that imitation learning could be the breakthrough that robotics needed, that we could teach robots like humans and make them understand and learn real world tasks. But we knew that ideas were cheap and execution was absolutely everything. And what Antler really provided for was they allowed us to actually have that crucible to test and sharpen and hone our vision. And it really forced us to move quickly, to validate our assumptions and really try to articulate our value proposition in a way that really resonated beyond just technical experts. Because I'm not a technical expert myself. Talking to other VCs, talking to other customers, they're not technical experts themselves. So we weren't just trying to pitch a research project, we were pitching a venture scale company. And that mindset shift was really critical. And that's where working with Antler throughout their program really helped hone some of that as well. But then, like I said, there was the funding element. And that funding, yes, it was the catalyst because it then gave us the runway to build our first prototypes. It helped us validate our first approach to the robots. It helped us assemble our core team that we've got now as well. And so we weren't just tinkering our garage now. We've now had, once we had the Antler investment, we were starting to actually build that company. So in a way, it gave us that runway, that cash runway, but it also gave us other things that were a bit more harder to quantify. So we've got that access to that global network of mentors. We've got access to other investors, to advisors as well. And through the program, we really connected with a lot of other industry veterans in other allied industries, AI experts, deep tech experts, for example, other founders who'd been down a similar route. And it was really the insights of our peers and others around that network which really helped us hone our strategy and approach from that perspective as well. So it really gave us that confidence
That's a
that
fantastic
we weren't
feedback.
crazy.
Yeah, that's a fantastic feedback about Antler program. Like I personally really like it as well, and I think it's one of the best in Australia in terms of like how much they give and how much they equity. And correct me if I'm wrong. You started in August last year, right?
Yes, we did. It feels like a lifetime ago, but it was only in August.
And what's your progress so far between August and now? So what's the progress and what is the next milestone?
Yeah, so it's been very much a whirlwind journey for us. Like I said, August seems like a lifetime ago in terms of the milestones that we've hit and what we've done from just an idea to taking it through to fruition, where we've actually got a functional prototype and some real world validation that we've got for this. And I think, like I said, we started off with that really bold vision in August, that imitation learning could finally break through the bottlenecks in robotics. But there was that gap at that time between the vision and a working product. And it was massive. We thought it's going to take a lot of time to actually bridge that gap itself. So we hit the ground running. We knew we needed to move fast. We focused on building prototypes. We tried to validate our core thesis that a robot could learn that useful skill from human demonstration without coding, and it worked. We did some early testing on real robotic arms. We did some testing in simulation as well. We showed that an actual physical robot that we could actually train it in just a matter of hours. That journey from that idea to having that product that we've got now hasn't been linear. We had many key tough calls to make, many decisions to make around what features do we focus on, what pilots are we going to go with, how are we going to scope them, how are we going to navigate that tension between deployment and research itself. So along the way, we've generated that momentum, we secured that early funding, we've signed more pilot agreements, we're actively raising at the moment for our next pre-seed scale-up piece. So we've really gone from that idea to a tangible product in less than a year, I think probably 9 months now. And we're only just getting started, and there's a lot more to do, which is really exciting from our perspective.
Yeah, just like any startup, right? It's all about priorities. There's so many things to do. And in terms of the founding, so you're saying you are actively raising the next raise right now. So how was it so far for you? And have you raised anything after the Antler program?
So straight after the Antler program, our key thing was really to build that proof of concept and do that real world validation. So we didn't want to start raising prematurely at the start before we actually had something to demonstrate and show to the VCs themselves. And so we purposely took a more targeted and a more tailored approach and said, actually, we're not going to focus on raising now, we're going to focus on development to build that piece. So we're at that point now where we're starting to undertake our next raise, but it's also been quite an eye-opening experience going through this whole fundraising piece. It's been quite humbling, it's been quite a learning journey for all of us as well. And I think I've been a prior startup founder in the past, but haven't actively worked in deep tech. So there's been a bit of a learning curve for me personally throughout the fundraising journey, particularly because we're not just a pure SaaS platform, we're working in deep tech as well. In software startups, if you think about it, investors are looking for traction first. They want users, they want revenue, they want growth curves. But you look at deep tech, particularly robotics and AI, you're pre-revenue. You're pre-product, you're pre-product market fit at this stage. So the conversation when you're talking to investors at this stage really shifts. It's more about vision. It's about team. It's about defensibility. It's about technical differentiation and moats. You're selling a future, not a current snapshot compared to other startups in the past as well. And I think that shift had some challenges. It wasn't easy. And part of that is kind of that emotional roller coaster or that journey that you have to go on, because one day you're in a room or a conversation with a VC who really gets it. They say, wow, it's got awesome potential. The scale of this is revolutionary. The impact of this is huge. It's very unique. And you feel invincible. The next year in a meeting with another angel or investor, and they say, well, actually, come back to us when you've got revenue. Come back to us when you've already got 20 million on the books that you're bringing in. Or my personal favorite, which is, can't robots already do that? Why do you need that? So you go through these highs and lows talking to VCs and angels at this stage. So it's that continual test of conviction around, are you willing to keep fighting for that vision that you started back in August, just less than a year ago? How are you able to absorb some of the rejections that you received without it shaking your belief that you've got this wonderful product that can benefit the rest of the world? At the same time, you have that continual challenge between the long-term vision with those short-term proof points that a lot of investors want as well. And the hard thing is, like I said, we're trying to build this platform that redefines how robots learn, but it's a multi-year opportunity. And often, depending on the investors that you're going with, they want to see a lot more near-term traction. So we're having to refine our milestones and what that means in terms of pre-orders, pilots, partnerships and the like, and trying to articulate the journey that we're going on, but also the concrete steps that we're taking to actually get there as well. So it really, I guess, forces you to be ruthless when you're having these conversations and you're planning out your next fundraising journey as well.
Amazing. And how do you stay sane in all this environment, and how do you stay positive? Because I think that's the hardest things about startup. There's so many rejections and so many different objections towards your pitch, just like as you mentioned. Right? How do you still stay optimistic, stay focused?
Yeah, I think if I think about not just startups in general, but I think about deep tech startups more specifically, it's not for the faint of heart. Like, as we've spoken about, the runway is very, very long. The pathway's uncertain, the returns aren't immediate. But for me personally, the motivation really comes from that very clear sense of why we're actually doing this. We're not chasing a quick buck, we're chasing impact. We're building something long-lasting with generational impact that, if we get it right, fundamentally changes how robots learn. how industries adapt, and how humans actually interact with machines. So it's that real sense of purpose that really keeps me focused in amongst those day-to-day and tactical fluctuations. And every day I just remind myself, this is the frontier. We're solving problems that no one else has solved. It's not supposed to be easy. If it was, we wouldn't be doing it. That's exactly why we're doing it as a team. So practically, we're staying focused by really breaking down that long-term vision that we've got into smaller incremental milestones and achievements themselves. And yes, revenue will be further down the line, but what can we validate this month? What can we validate this quarter? What can we validate over the next 6 months? What experiments can we run this week to de-risk the technology? What pilots can we secure in the next week or in the next month? So really trying to frame progress as a series of smaller, bite-sized stepping stones so that we're not actually overwhelmed by that long-term horizon for 12, 24, 36 months down the track as well. Because as I've said, deep tech's a very different time of game. You look at DeepMind, you look at OpenAI, they took years upon years of development before commercialization, well before their product market fit was actually developed and unlocked. Like, the impact's exponential. We're building the foundation of something much bigger, and it takes patience. And that's the key thing there. Have that patience, look at the longer term, but break it down into those shorter term chunks itself. Because if we get this right, the long runway is actually a feature that actually protects us. It's not a bug. It's actually a moat that protects us once we're there, because it's got such a long lead time to actually get there.
Yeah, I see. Let's talk about runway. As a small startup, you obviously didn't raise a big round just yet. And how do you cope with probably not up to market salary compared to a previous job, and the same for your co-founders? Do you have any budgeting tips, and what the tips for people who are thinking about quitting their job and start some venture?
I'd say if you want to be doing something in this space, if you want to be founding a deep tech startup, you need to be 100% committed. You need to be going all in. You need to understand what it's going to mean for your back pocket in the short term, in the medium term, in the long term. You need to be 100% committed, because we are bootstrapping this on the side as well with our own funding. And that's the reality of a startup. A startup in Australia, a deep tech startup, you need to bootstrap it yourselves as well as acquiring that funding. And you need to take sacrifices, and you need to take hits along the way. It's never going to be an easy journey. And you can't sugarcoat it. Like, the stress of building a deep tech startup like this, especially like what we've got at this early stage, I liken it to running an ultra marathon where you actually don't know if there's going to be any water at the next aid station. You're not even going to know where the next aid station is. You're burning cash every day, but yet it still feels like a bit of a sprint, but you still don't have those comforting metrics of revenue or growth charts to reassure you. So it's kind of running aimlessly and running into the unknown, but you've still got this really strong vision far into the future of what you want to achieve. So how do you manage that? Well, again, I keep reminding myself every single day, this is a long game. We're not selling an app. We're building a foundational technology that could fundamentally transform industries themselves. And if you look at, like I said, other companies, Tesla, DeepMind, OpenAI, they burned cash. They burned years and years of capital before actually hitting inflection points. And having, I think, that perspective and understanding that others have been there and done that before actually really helps understand that journey itself. Apart from that, I also take care of my own mental game. So again, embracing that whole discomfort instead of fighting it. Like, I think if I look at successful founders, so not just companies, but founders who have lasted and been through multiple iterations of various startups, they've kind of got that very stoic mindset. Like I said, you accept that stress is part of the deal. Uncertainty is a default state when you're a founder in a startup itself. And that your job is actually to make those decisions under pressure, when you're burning cash, when you've got that short runway. So for me, to work with some of that, to stay sane throughout this, it means for me also understanding what can I do outside of work? How can I remain physically active? Going for a run, having a solid support system, having friends and family around me, and really keeping things in perspective as well, whilst you're burning through a lot of that. And just reminding myself, well, I chose this. I made a conscious choice and a conscious decision to go down this path. I didn't start a lifestyle business. What I set out to do was solve a very hard, important problem. And I knew it was going to be stressful, but that's also what makes it worthwhile from that perspective as well. So it's not so much about managing your budgets and your finances when you're burning every day. I think the key thing for a lot of founders is just managing yourself, managing your emotions, managing how you feel, so you're not burning out through all of this as well. And whilst budgets might be one part of it, it's actually the more introspective element that I really find more interesting, but also just as, or maybe even more important for longevity for this process itself as a founder.
Yes, as someone said, suffering is the best stage in the life because that's exactly when we grow, that's exactly when we learn and find solutions and take actions which we may not take in our normal, comfortable life. So the last question is, what is one thing that keeping you up at the night right now?
For me, there's multiple things keeping up at night, but I think the one thing on my mind at the top is really around the pace of execution versus the pace of capital. So as you pointed out, as a tech startup, you've got a very defined cash run there. You've got your initial investment, and you're burning and churning through that until you get your next chunk of investment from that perspective. And as we know, the timelines are long in terms of development. Like I keep saying, we're building foundational AI infrastructure for robotics. It's not an app that you can launch in a weekend or overnight. The market moves fast, but the capital is finite, and that's what we're fixed with. Every single month, we're burning that cash, we're making big progress, but we're also racing against the clock before that runway actually burns out. And so for me, on a nightly basis, on a weekly basis, I worry about that classic deep tech trap that everyone kind of gets caught up in. You have this world-class technology, but you can't get it into customers' hands fast enough to prove that you've got that commercial value before that runway actually runs out. And so that's why at the moment we're very laser focused on getting pilots into the field and showing that our platform doesn't just work in the lab. It's not just a piece of academic literature. It actually works. It solves real world problems for real businesses and real people and real customers themselves. So it's that really delicate dance between pushing too fast and over promising to a customer or a pilot customer before the product is ready. But on the other hand, moving too cautiously, moving too slowly, losing momentum, running out of that cash runway. So that's why for me, the main thing keeping me up at night is really finding that balance around building enough to prove value without burning through your resources prematurely. And that's really what keeps me up at night because, yeah, unless we get this right, something's got to give.
Yeah, great. I hope everything goes well with your startup, and I hope you close the next round pretty soon, and you have all the capital to build this big, bold vision that you have right now. Thank you so much for the interview.
Thank you, Anna.